Continued_deliberations.docx. 052 let the email alert fade from her terminal screen without opening it. She already knew that the Foundation had suffered more casualties in the past 24 hours than all of the last 5 years put together. The only thing reading the details would accomplish would be the sapping of her resolve. The path forward was clear. Ensuring a future was worth any price. She wished she could tell each field commander personally, "We're certain about this. Just hold the line." Then again, desperation was on her side. People had a remarkable tenacity in the face of death. Nobody needed to remind anyone of what the consequences of failure were. The large video monitor on the wall beside her chimed with an incoming video conference notification. 053. She buried her face in her hands. Did she not get her fill of vitriol during the council vote? Knowing 053, it was quite likely. She sat up. Internecine warfare was one of the few ways the council had to amuse itself in this world. Even now, those habits died hard. Maybe especially now. She motioned at the screen, and 053's dark, lined face was on her wall. "Vote's over 3. You lost. Does that still make you mad?" The woman on the screen sighed. "What I am is scared, too." It had not yet been a full 2 days since SCP-2798 had gone down, and the toll had been horrific. There was no way that current operations were sustainable for more than a week. Fear was probably the only reasonable response. Telling someone else that you're frightened isn't very therapeutic in our line of work. 3. Fear is contagious. Can I do something for you? 053 leaned a little closer to the monitor. "You blocked the vote. You cut off our exit." "Oh, bull. There was plenty of us with doubts." "But none with the certainty of yours. 5 and 13 were never going to vote for it anyway, but 6 and 12 would have. I talked to them before. I know that you talked them out of it. That's still not enough. 1 was the difference, and even you can't tell me that I can make 1 bend to anything." 053 sighed again. "Look, that doesn't matter, I guess. It's done, and that's that. But you owe me something, too." "Do I?" 052 moved closer herself now. "I owe you something for not letting you kill everyone? You're beyond absurd. I'm done with this now." "Wait. Please. I need to know." 053 paused a moment while she forced out the question. "I need to know what you know. I need you to tell me why we didn't just make the worst mistake in the history of the world. The reason, too." 052's hand hovered over the red button to end the call. She pulled it back. "I went to the precog items. I peeked." The revelation washed over 053's hard features, her determined upper lip and furrowed brow softening as her face betrayed shock. It was the first time 052 had seen her face like that. "You didn't! That can't possibly be! Is it really that hard to believe? With the gun in your own mouth, you're not the least bit curious about how things might turn out if you don't pull the trigger? Yes, I'm aware of the prohibitions. Who cares about that now? Are you going to report me? Requisition a detail to come and detain me in the middle of all of this?" 053 sat in silence. There was no arguing the point. "So what did you see?" "You know what it's like, 3, being old. Ideally, you learn to not delude yourself with false hope. Resign yourself. You remember the old 11? He obsessed with uploading his consciousness like he could cheat death. Ridiculous. He was ridiculous." 2 trailed off, the wild eyes of the former 0511 haunting her for a moment. "But this, we've always fought to preserve what is, 3. We've never thought about what could be." "What do you mean by that?" "All of the precog items point to a future. I haven't seen how we get to it, but it's not just survival. I saw great spires of glass that pierced the clouds, unspoiled landscapes, great flocks of birds passing through cityscapes built into mountaintops. I've seen people who don't fear sickness and death, no wars, no poverty." She grew animated. "All of the anomalies under our control that can tell us anything have all showed me this place, that it exists. Someone survives to make it there." 053 looked skeptical. "That's a very different place than the one we're seeing now." "It's a different planet, we know that much." Do you think that we're going to be able to mount a space colonization mission when we can't even keep ourselves alive right now? No, probably not, said 052. But at some point, someone does, and I want to give whoever that is the chance to do that. Don't you see? There's a point to all of this now. There's an end goal for humanity, more than just living another night. Our children will have a chance not just to live, but to live in peace. Isn't that worth continuing on? That seems very ideal, doesn't it? Said 053. Almost like it's designed to stay our hand. What reason do I have to make this up? And it was as useless a tool to influence the council. If I had brought this up during the vote, I very well would have been detained then. You do seem to believe it. 053 frowned. You know that these things, they can be very untrustworthy. One or two, maybe they come up with the same deception, said 052. All of them? Vanishingly unlikely. Some of these things are kept in separate realities. No, this is all pointing to something, and I believe it's true. Or rather, I believe in it enough to keep going for the chance to make it real. 053 was silent for a moment. She swallowed. You know that we've already had 2 activations of SCP-089 in 2 days? 052 took a moment. No, I didn't know that, and really I'd prefer not to know things like that. She went on. Nothing we're doing now is anything that we haven't been called upon to do before. It's harder, but it's the same thing. We've always tried to preserve some sort of future, and now that we've got proof of it, we can't stop now. Proof, said 053 quietly. Gosh, I hope you know what you're doing too. Just help me hold things together until we can't do it anymore, so that whoever it is that gets us out of here and away from whatever the hell it is that's haunting us can do their duty. 052 fought hard, and the tears stayed in her eyes. She would not let them flow. 053, impossibly weary, looking sick and unwell, every one of her 68 years on display, nodded barely. She ended the call, and 052 was left looking at her own reflection in the dark glass of the monitor. She studied her own face for a moment. She had more hope than 3 did, but for all of that, she looked just as heartsick, just as scared. I hope I know what I'm doing too. 052 opened the message from Asian Subcommand and read the latest developments. More of the same. A_night_at_the_movies.pst 2057 from Pendergast William. Planetary survey data. Relevant. Urgency high. Sir, the last data from Kepler 5 is in. We have 2 possible exoplanets that are theoretically suited for human life. In addition to being candidates for an eventual colonization effort, the preponderance of Goldilocks zone planets points to an increased likelihood that an alternative site for human civilization can at some point in the future be established. It is also worth noting that our probes continue to find no sign of HEs, or any extraterrestrial life for that matter. If I may express a personal opinion, I found this surprising. Nevertheless, the longer we go without contact, frankly, the better. This seems to lend further credence to the human survival hypothesis. Consider releasing some of this information to help build morale among the operatives. They could use it. Signed, General William Pendergast, Lead, Project Heimdall. To Pendergast William, from 057. Planetary survey data. Relevant. Urgency high. General, appreciate your latest message. It looks like 2 may be right after all. That's something at least. While we're dealing with 001. Couple of things to remember as you look out there. We're beginning to believe that 001 resides somewhere out in physical space. Not like you need any reminders, but look out for anything that might fit this description. That includes communications. It might try to talk to us again. The other thing you should know is that I was the one back in 54 that got the message from it. That message hasn't been declassified yet, but you're likely to be the first that gets any other messages, so you should know. Some stuff that isn't in the file, whatever it is, knows about the Foundation. because the message came straight to me, and that's because I was the one in charge of finding out what was behind the spike in anomalous activity. It's very familiar with us, General, and it knew enough about me to know I was a movie buff. It's left me directions to some place out in the desert, not so far I couldn't get there in a few hours, so it knew where I lived. I drove out with a team in some jeeps, and in the middle of nowhere there was a movie house. And I mean the middle of nowhere. No roads, no human habitation. Then in a washed-out gully was the movie house I'd gone to as a little kid. We were a little more wild in those days, so I told my boys to wait while I went inside. It speaks to us in performance. It likes it better that way. It could just tell us whatever it wants, really. But this is one more way to mess with us, I think. Anyway, nice and air-conditioned inside, colder than hell. Soon as I sat down, the lights dimmed, and it showed me a movie. Not like any movie I'd ever seen, but it was most certainly a movie. The title was Planet of Hands in English. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. There wasn't a story as such, more like a disjointed series of images. Some stuff was real famous, and I recognized it immediately. A lot of military footage, scenes of large battles, aftermaths of bombing campaigns, stuff like that. I recognized Stalingrad from the newsreels, and there were some scenes of what I assume was the Battle of Passchendaele. I didn't realize there were movies of that. Mixed in with that, though, were other things. Some were film scenes, same quality as the other stuff, of what had to have been other events from history. Mass starvations, a volcano eruption or two, villages of Indians being run through by Spanish conquistadors. Not very subtle. Then the scenes of the sights started. Still shots of buildings and facilities, all of which I knew to be ours. Pretty clear message for us there. Are you with me so far? Strange stuff, but nothing we hadn't encountered before. That's when it got bad. At the next instant, I was no longer in the theater. I was in my seat, but everything around me had changed. Vibrant colors, oversaturated hues, like a mad painter had conjured them. They were everywhere. People, things, places swirling around me, all of it lit up like neon, so that I could see things after I closed my eyes. And it was just a mass of unspeakable acts. All the murder and pillage from thousands of years had been forced into the room, each act phasing into and out of others, moment to moment. I can't recall any image staying in the room more than a few seconds, except the scene directly in front of me. It was a Turk, I think, clothed in a resplendent robe of technicolor blood, his face barely visible behind an electric blue beard. He was casually forcing people down onto a sharpened stake embedded in the ground, impaling them over and over, the victim coming into and out of focus. First an old woman, then a soldier, then a child, back to another woman, each one after the other, bang, bang, bang. The blood would splash on his robe, and he would glow brighter each time. He didn't look angry and hateful. He looked like this was the most natural thing in the world, pushing someone down onto a stake until it forced its way up through their guts as they screamed, until they bled out. If I'd focused on another part of the room for any length of time, I think I would have seen similar things. How long this went on, I can't say. I saw a younger man then, and I'm not ashamed to say that at a certain point I just covered my eyes and waited for it to stop. I'd probably do the same today. When I finally looked up again, the theater was back around me, the movie still being screened. What I saw up there was myself, now a part of the movie. I looked obscenely happy. At my age, I don't look into a lot of mirrors, but I tell you, I've never seen a smile like that on myself then and now. That, more than anything, has stayed with me. You should never be surprised by an expression on your own face. It's awful. In the movie, I was boarding something. Like a big wooden ark, I suppose. Something out of a kid's book about Noah and the flood, purely symbolic. I watched myself on screen as I stepped into the ark. Some other people were getting on with me. A woman, a black man, some children, an old Chinaman. All walks of life, I guess. No one I recognized. When we were all aboard, the ark lifted into the heavens, sailing through the cosmos. It even had the Buck Rogers music in the background as the stars whizzed by. The ark came to what I assumed was a planetary system of some kind. A planet looking a lot like Earth, blue and white and brown and green, at the center of a wild system of moons. I thought of an atom. The arc moved closer and closer to one of the moons until it came into view. This wasn't like Earth. This was a darkened nightscape illuminated by fires out in the land. All that was visible was soot, smoke, fire, a few rusty scraps of metal twisted into big, man-sized shapes. You know how the music swells when the movie ends? That was happening as we all disembarked as the ship touched down on the night moon. All the characters on the screen looked just ecstatic with joy. As I said, disconcerting when you see something like that in your own face. The movie was fading out now, but rather than the end placket appearing like it does, some other text appeared, this time in Russian, which we think was intended to be something like "Come home" instead. Why it started in English and finished in Russian, I have no idea. Maybe some smart-ass commentary on the Cold War, which would be a point of hope in dealing with this thing, fallibility. I have my suspicions as to why this doesn't show up in the main file. That doesn't matter, though. You need context for any future attempts at communication from 001. Now you have it. Watch yourself. 7. Standard Dream Report 66-Y990-1.pdf. Document 990-03. Dr. Blank reported a manifestation of SCP-990 during a dream occurring 17 hours ago. Per emergency orders distributed to all personnel regarding possible data on SCP-001, Dr. Blank filed the following report and forwarded it on to the director of Site-17. The report was subsequently transmitted to Overwatch Command. Form 66Y, Standard Dream Report, Personnel, Dr. Blank. Estimated degree of recall, 60%. Anomalous entity present? Yes. Likelihood of actionable intelligence, high. Description: SCP-990 is dressed in the same suit, looking the same as ever. I recognize him immediately. He is the clearest element in any dream he visits. His face changes a lot from dream to dream, but this time it's changing from one moment to the next. I attribute it to the high stress of the past couple days. He tells me he's going to show me some things. I feel apprehension, and I wonder what burnt-out ruin he's going to show me, because that has to be what this is about, right? Our time has come, and this is going to be what awaits us. I try to wake up, but I can't do it, and it feels like I'm sitting at the bottom of a pool, and I can't will myself to go to the surface. I don't think I've felt panic like that in a dream before. 990 shakes his head. I can't tell if it's him keeping me here, or if it's the dream itself. We've never been able to figure out what kind of control he has. He says, "I'm going to guide you, blank, but I need something of you first," and he points at my left hand. It's a dream, right? Even with all of the things we've encountered in this field, I've never seen anyone harmed in that way. I hold out my hand. 990 nods at me, and he takes something out of his coat. It looks like a blade of some kind. It's got a sharp edge at least, not a knife, more like something from a lawnmower or some piece of industrial machinery. Before I have time to ask what's going on, he's brought the blade down through my wrist, lightning fast. I look at my hand, terrified, and I'm sure that it's going to fall off, and blood is going to start spraying any second. But nothing happens. I stare in shock for a few seconds. The pain is real, but I'm afraid to move my arm because my hand is going to fall off if I do. 990 looks sympathetic, and he tells me that I can move my hand, it's fine. Then he says that we're out of reach of 001 now, and we can talk. I wiggle my fingers and they work like they should, but my hand is numb. The feeling is disconcerting, yet the sensation of panic from earlier is gone. Things feel more like normal now, except for my hand. He looks at me. He's got my face now. I get the impression that I am someone else now. Feels like a woman, but I'm not certain. Identity shifts a little as we talk. He tells me that he can give me 3 revelations before 001 finds him again. Suddenly we're sitting outside, in the night air under the stars. There are 9 moons in the sky, varying sizes and phases. I'm in a child's body. He's still me. He speaks, holding up one finger. "You are not in your proper place," he says. I ask him what that means. Me personally, the Foundation, mankind? He ignores me. He raises a second finger. 052 is absolutely correct, and she is disastrously wrong. The reference to specific Foundation personnel is unnerving. I start to speak, but I can tell he's not going to listen. The third finger, the third revelation. He leans in close to me. This is the trickiest one, he tells me. He asks me to commit this one to memory above all others, and so I have for this report. This is the last thing he said to me before I woke up. The primary mover behind what you know as SCP-001, above all things, is love. That was when I awoke at my workstation. After Action Report 2272.pdf. On 7th November 2016, 0430 Eastern Daylight Time, operatives with Local Mobile Task Force 352 Delay received reports from Major League Baseball wire services that RHB Ellis Canastota had been assigned to the 40-man roster of the Cincinnati Reds franchise. This event triggered heightened alert notices to be sent to all staff assigned to SCP-2272. At 0445 Eastern Daylight Time, a second notice was sent through official MLB channels that Ellis Canastota had been called up to join the 25-man Major League roster of the Cincinnati Reds. All available personnel, including the entirety of LMTF 352 Delay, were then mobilized. He lay on his side and continued staring at the bright green digits of the alarm clock on the side table. Every few seconds, at irregular intervals, his work phone would buzz, the flood of emails vibrating the half-empty water glass and moving the phone slightly closer to the edge of the table each time. They had sent him home to sleep, and that's what he was going to pretend to do for the next couple of hours. Bzzz, bzzz. The phone continued its shuffle to the edge of the table. They probably thought they were doing everyone a favor when they sent the declassified info around, like they were letting everyone in on a big secret. Who wouldn't enjoy that? Bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. He certainly hadn't. No one had said anything about mass distribution of cyanide ampules that he had ever heard. There weren't any rumors. He had been blissfully unaware. Before last week, his biggest headache had been the non-stop political advertisements on the car radio. Those were the days. The clock blinked to 4:30 a.m. His phone started a lower, repeated, much more insistent buzzing now. The additional force of the vibrations carried the phone right off the edge, finally completing its journey to the floor with a thud. The buzzing of the waiting phone call persisted, muffled now by the carpet. He leaned down and groped for the phone, dreading what he knew he would see. He picked it up, the light from the screen hurting his eyes as he stared at it. Calling, Regional Director Kate McTirris. He shielded his eyes from the light of the phone, trying in vain to dull the throbbing in his head. Alred Smith here. The director's voice chirped in his ear. He sat all the way up in the bed. So much for pretending to sleep. They're going to call up Canastota? Huh. Well, figured we were due to catch a prime by this point. Okay, what are your orders? The voice on the other end of the line provided a laundry list of instructions and available personnel. If the director was more worried than normal, she didn't show it. Some things were the same, he guessed. Got it. I'll go ping the clandestine IT guy to scrub all this. Is the office open yet? He tried smoothing a deep crease in his shirt with the palm of his hand. The crease paid him no mind, nor did his hair as he tried to smooth it back down with his fingers. Whatever. Let someone complain about him looking like he'd slept on a park bench and come into work. He could use some comic relief. Because I need something out there just in case. He put on his shoes and straightened his tie. He grabbed a baseball cap from the dresser to cover his hair. He laughed despite himself. No, nothing. Yeah, that's what I'm getting. You have a... The voice cut him off. He listened intently as he surveyed himself in the mirror. The cartoon fish on the front of his cap, wrapping itself around a baseball bat, looked like he meant business. Huh? Decommission? That's a new one. No, don't worry, boss. We won't hesitate if things get hairy. The director hung up. He looked for his keys. This was probably going to involve more than the IT guys before this was done. At 05:21 hours, the MLB official scheduler posted a notice online for a game to be played at noon the same day between the Cincinnati Reds and the St. Louis Cardinals at the Great American Ballpark in central Cincinnati. The starting pitchers were listed as Mike Leake for the St. Louis Cardinals and Ellis Canastota for the Cincinnati Reds. What do you mean they're playing a game today? They just finished the World Series. Dr. Hanaka barked loud enough to be heard from the front of the bus-sized mobile command center as it sped north on Interstate 75. It's probably snowing there or something by now. Actually, the weather's pretty nice today. Agent Alred Smith gazed out the window as he balanced the long black case on his knees, which is far worse for keeping people out of the stadium. Fudge, sighed Dr. Hanaka. How many tickets were sold before we took the notice down? A young woman sitting across from Alred Smith at a mobile terminal quickly pecked at a keyboard. 17,397 tickets total, ma'am. It's a good thing we got the ESPN piece before they aired it. Pretty novel, an exhibition game right after the series. 17,000? This is a disaster. Dr. Hanaka paced the rear of the command center. Enriquez, get into the ballpark contracting system. I want our security folks there. And if we can, I want concessions done by us too. Everyone in the park who isn't on the field or in the stands should be one of us. The young logistics officer looked up at Dr. Hanaka from his terminal. You want us selling hot dogs? Dr. Hanaka's eyes flashed behind her glasses. She loomed over the sitting Enriquez. Hot dogs, beer, licorice, nachos, and effing churros if we can manage it. She threw her clipboard to the ground. We've got a breaching anomaly with a paying audience of 17,000 people. You shut the F up and do as you're damn told. Understand? Agent Alred Smith couldn't help but think back to the last time he'd heard Dr. Hanaka speak at a seminar on an academic peer review a few months ago. He recalled struggling to hear the soft-spoken doctor from the back of the room. He coughed into his fist a couple times to conceal his laughter as the unfortunate Enriquez scrambled to fulfill his orders. LMTF 352 Delay arrived at the Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati at 11:47 hours local time. Given the number of civilians in the vicinity with the specific purpose of attending a baseball game, closing the ballpark was deemed to be unfeasible. By the time doors were opened to spectators, 78% of service personnel within the stadium were comprised of Foundation or Foundation-contracted personnel. Operatives at the scene elected to monitor the ongoing events and determine the next course of action. Agent Dunbar stepped into the luxury suite crammed with flyers, monitoring equipment, and computer terminals befitting an improvised command center. He looked out the window. The field below was ready for play. The grass freshly mowed, the infield perfectly manicured. A fresh Reds logo outlined in chalk behind home plate. They just posted the lineups, ma'am. You're not going to like it. Dr. Hanaka sighed. How can there even be lineups? We've checked locations on everyone. None of the players from either team are in the area or aware of the game. What does it matter? Agent Dunbar fidgeted slightly. Canastota is starting at every position. Great, said Dr. Hanaka. More of him. For both teams, ma'am. The room was silent for a moment. All of the members of LMTF 352 Delay looking to Dr. Hanaka for the next set of orders. She looked down at the game. Cheers went up as what looked like the Cincinnati Reds took the field. She grabbed a set of field binoculars and looked again. Sure enough, every single player was the same smiling, dark-haired young man, each one's uniform bearing the same number, 72, on the back, the name Canastota embroidered above. She looked to the signals technician of the group. Readings? The older man, at an especially equipment-laden terminal, responded. Aerial sonar readings are negative. There's no one on the field except the umpires. At least he's not officiating his own game. That would be unsporting. Dr. Hanaka put down the binoculars. Narrative officers. I need disinfo and social media posts out and blanketing the internet within 15 minutes. This is a publicity stunt. See that is perceived that way. Be ready to pull it back if things don't go well. A group of 3 researchers in the corner of the room immediately pulled out phones and laptops and got to work. Dr. Hanaka moved on. Crowd control. Ensure that all of our vendors are fully stocked, with Class Cs. Don't start distributing unless I give the order. A man in a police officer's uniform stepped out of the room, already relaying instructions into the walkie-talkie in his hand. Memetics! I want every communication coming out of that stadium screened for anomalous influences. Use the new AI we've developed. We don't have time to round up human subjects for observation. A frazzled-looking woman in the seats by the windows, concern in her eyes, opened her mouth. She looked at Dr. Hanaka. She closed her mouth and began tapping at a tablet computer. And you, Agent Alred Smith? Dr. Hanaka now loomed over the agent, reclining in a chair next to the sweet refrigerator. I want you up in the cheap seats with your toy there. She nodded to the long black case in Agent Alred Smith's lap. He nodded back. Your signal? My signal, Agent. Due to ongoing containment efforts coordinated at the scene by LMTF 352 delay, spectators at Great American Ballpark were documented to be under the impression that they were watching a non-anomalous game of baseball until approximately 14:52 hours local time, coinciding with the middle of the game's 7th inning. At that time, an individual matching all known biometric data of the baseball player Pedro Borbon, footnote 1, Pedro Borbon was confirmed deceased in 2012, and identifying themselves as such, took the field and was handed a microphone, presumably as part of the traditional singing of Take Me Out to the Ball Game during the 7th inning of baseball games. Notable discomfort among assembled spectators was audible as the identity of the speaker became apparent. Agent Alred Smith surveyed the infield through his high-powered scope. Part of SCP-2272 duty was being familiar with baseball, and he knew a dead player when he saw one. He touched his earpiece. This is way beyond documented behavior, Doctor. Do I have authorization? Dr. Hanaka barked within his ear. No, damn it! You have authorization when I say you do. You're going to wait until a dead man starts doing whatever it is the hell dead people do here? Your apparatus is set up? Agent Alred Smith touched the tripod directly in front of him. Affirmative, Doctor. Then you'll be able to react in under 5 seconds when I give the word. I'd explain how we need to learn all we can, but then I don't need to explain jack to you, Agent. You wait for my signal. Roger that, Doctor. He leaned back in his seat. The dead man was speaking now, the crowd on their feet in anticipation. Pedro Borbon, noted multi-inning relief pitcher and deceased member of the Big Red Machine teams of the 1970s, looked skyward as he held the microphone. Sport is a wonderful symbol of the human condition. You will be relieved to hear that, much the same way it is in this place, in our perfect society, sport is a sacred pastime. The crowd was silent. Sport is more than competition. Sport creates victors and vanquished. The feeling of triumph cannot exist without the sacrifice of the defeated. You will understand more after we have truly spoken. The dead pitcher looked every bit the spry athlete of generations ago, spoke with an impassive face. This place, this game, this creation, this is a fine place for us to speak plainly. Agent Alred Smith scanned the crowd for any unusual activity. All in the stadium were still and perfectly silent. For the first time, the pitcher smiled. We have heard a story from your people many times, I'm sure you're familiar, of a man asking his friend, returned from the grave, if there is baseball in heaven. Let me tell you, my brothers and sisters, there is baseball in heaven. The speaker laughed, a high-pitched screeching thing, not at all matching the expression on his face. Alred Smith trained the scope on the pitcher's face. And today we can all see together. They have baseball in hell, too. As he stopped speaking, the house organ came up. The familiar notes of the traditional song of 7th inning stretches across the country ringing out. Pedro Borbon doffed his cap for the silent audience and faded away into nothing. The organ continued. No one sang. Communications via social media and personal messages from civilians in attendance of the game increased greatly following the remarks of the unknown entity during the 7th inning. The number of messages, combined with the content indicating what had occurred, necessitated elevated containment protocols. At 14:59 hours local time, Dr. Akane Hanaka authorized decommissioning of SCP-2272 and mass deployment of amnestics. The precursor agents had been authorized for distribution at the end of the 3rd inning. Every refreshment item served in the ballpark had Part A of a Class C 2-part amnestic. Based on field studies and their own observations of the game, the task force chemist assured Dr. Hanaka that the penetration rate was in excess of 90%, more than enough to ensure memory alteration and suggestibility among the critical mass threshold of the crowd. Dr. Hanaka nodded and barked some words into a nearby handset. A small prop plane carrying a banner behind it reading 2016 Winter Exhibition and previously circling the stadium throughout the day, now swooped low over the Great American Ballpark, looking to have just enough altitude to avoid hitting the lights. A great plume of scarlet smoke billowed from the rear of the plane. Part B was being released. The reaction would be powerful enough to allow the narrative team to conduct a plausible mass delusion that would hopefully obscure all details of what the crowd had watched here today. As the plane flew overhead, Agent Alfred Smith adjusted his gas mask and lined up a shot. The camera mounted on the tripod was a delicate, finicky instrument, and the satellite link was proving tricky. 3 different observation modalities, including a converted form of the sonar feed, were needed to achieve the necessary viewpoint in which SCP-2272 would be obliterated. The research seemed to indicate that capturing the image of SCP-2272 in a format which would allow it to be both observed and unobserved would render it unstable as a coherent memeplex. Or something. The reasoning was above his pay grade. The green indicator light flashed on. He turned the camera on the field, making sure to capture the players on the field, the man waiting on deck, and both dugouts. All the smiling likenesses of Ellis Canastota, number 72, right-hand pitcher. All visual feeds were in tandem and functioning. He took the shot. At that moment, the billowing red cloud of smoke descended on him, obscuring the field, the seats, and all of his surroundings. He held the mask tight in place against his face, ensuring that none of the air around him leaked in. The amnestics officer would be pissed if they had to reconstruct his memory. A wind kicked up from the north, blowing out over the Ohio River and carrying the smoke out over the right field bleachers, like so many fly balls hit before. The view began to return as the smoke dissipated and retreated. Agent Alfred Smith dared to glance down at the field. Empty. 4 dumbstruck umpires were congregated around the pitcher's mound, doubtless discussing whether to call the game before their minds were temporarily thrown into a suggestible torpor. No players on the field, in foul territory, or in the dugouts. Not an Ellis Canastota to be seen. An image appeared on the camera's viewfinder. Alfred Smith looked closer. The image he had taken, the image that had apparently neutralized this long-running anomalous phenomenon, was not of the playing field of Great American Ballpark. In its place, a black and white team photo showed on the camera's screen. 25 men, arranged neatly in rows, wearing uniforms that he recognized as those of the first Cincinnati Red Legs team. All 25 bore the exact same smile that he had come to recognize as that of Ellis Canastota. Unlike a typical team photo, this photo was taken at night, under the stars. 9 moons could be seen in the sky. A sign propped in front of the smiling squadron read, "The past, the future." All 25 men were holding their arms out in front of them. All 25 men were missing their hands. Standard Dream Report 66Y990-2.pdf. Document 990-04. Per advice of a personal physician, 052 took several prescriptions in order to induce sleep in the early hours of 7th November 2016. Upon waking, 052 reported a manifestation of SCP-990, the first documented instance in which the anomaly has appeared to an overseer. Given the nature of the information contained within the dream event, this form is transcribed and is presented as dictated by 052 to blank, her personal assistant. Form 66-Y, Standard Dream Report. Personnel, 052. Estimated degree of recall, 83%. Anomalous entity present, yes. Likelihood of actionable intelligence, high. Description. Oh gosh, this is too big. I've made a horrible mistake. It's just, I have no idea. I didn't know. It's obscene, really, to say these things. I don't know what else to say. What? Okay, yes, I can get it down. I can think after. In 1978, I had a child. This is something that's highly discouraged for those in our position for obvious reasons. Who was the father? Don't ever ask me that question again. I'll end your life, I swear it. I had a child because I needed a bit of the future in my life. Something that would go on. It was a stupid reason to bring life into this world, but I'm a human, and I do stupid things. He was 3 years old. His name was Gabriel. And then he died of a terrible, wasting illness that our best doctors could not treat. He died with my name on his lips and convulsions racking his little body. Someone reading this file knows how that came to pass. I know it was you. You're afraid to ask now, but I see it on your face. I'm coming to the point. Gabriel came to me last night. No, damn you, not like a dream about a dead relative or some other silly nonsense. He came to me. He brought me to a hill. Atop the hill was 990, crucified, beaten so badly his face wasn't a face at all. His hands missing. His suit was impeccably pressed. Gabriel smiled up at me, forever 3. You think that you'll break down at moments like these, because who hasn't thought about moments like these, no matter how childish? You think that you will weep with joy and gather everything you've lost in your arms, and that things will be okay now, that you didn't make such horrifying mistakes, that you will be forgiven. When my dead son looked up at me, all that I felt was terror. Terror so great and overwhelming that I thought my heart would stop. I have never known anything like it. I was paralyzed. This was not right. This was not in any way right. And then he spoke. His voice was a man's voice. Worse than that, it was the voice I had imagined his voice being if he had grown to be a man. The smallest little fancies, shamefully foolish little hopes that were impossible and weak, and they were on display for this thing that's hunting us. What's that? Oh yes, it's hunting us. He said to me, oh gosh, he said to me, I've missed you, Mommy. And it was like being shot in the chest. I felt as though a great fist had closed around my head, squeezing the tears out of my face, my grief being wrung out against my will, against my screaming fear. When I came to my senses, he was still looking at me. He talked more. This was plainly 001 speaking through the figure in my dream. After this, 990 would echo whatever it said softly, moaning it from his scarecrow cross. None of us can believe in God, but this was surely a blasphemy. I'm going to try and remember what it said for all of our sakes. Okay, here's what it told me. You're tempted to think of us as your fathers, your gods, but we are actually your children. We're not quite your children because we came before you, but we love you like a child loves its parent. You know what I speak of. You have seen a future that is really a past and a present. It's our world. It's all that humanity is capable of. We live our days in paradise. Isn't that what you want for your children? Knowing that while you might suffer, while you might die, your children will see the better days, the sunlight without end? Maybe they won't have to die like you will, and so it is. We do not have to hurt. We do not hurt, we will not suffer. You and the others like you have brought us here. We are the perfect children of the perfect mothers and fathers. What no child says of his parent, but what every child thinks, is this: I am glad that I will live to bury these people. I am glad that they suffer on my behalf. I am glad that it is not me who is to die. For many, many years, these were feelings that brought shame. It wasn't until the latest stages of our perfection that we understood. This is a guide. This is order, demonstrated for us by the oldest of societal units. I need a glass of water. He giggled like he did when he was an infant as he finished that part. Oh, jeez. More history. I was attacked as a girl. It was a stranger in an alley, and it was the most horrifying experience of my life until my dead son explained our proper place in the cosmos to me. I cannot begin to describe how violating this was except to compare it. It's okay, you can look horrified. I allow it. Then he came to the heart of it. Here's the rest of what he said. Parents sacrifice for their children, don't they? Expend every little bit of flesh, will, intellect, everything they have so that their children may live an extra day in the hope of the sunshine that never ends? That's as it should be. You will remember. Many, many years ago, your kind left. We didn't figure out how until several centuries after, but somehow you transmitted yourselves far beyond even our reach. Some among you secretly understood the more forbidden aspects of space and time. You fled. Must I explain to you how your science is so woefully inadequate? How your knowledge was stolen and how we whittled away the little bits of it until you convinced yourselves that you just appeared on your little planet spontaneously? I will return some of your knowledge. You'll remember it because your society, even so far removed from us, is teaching it to you even now. Crawl towards the beautiful, undying place that you know exists, and you find that you turn on each other, dragging each other back, sabotaging hints of hope. You find that to be a failing, when in actuality it is an inescapable part of our species. A system can be made perfect. The gossamer webs that connect our minds and our spirits and our souls can be made perfect, free from corruption. But it must be done with the knowledge of suffering. It must be done knowing that others are suffering on your behalf. Why that is, we cannot say. It does not matter. It merely is. Our very souls are in harmony with each other because we know that we lie at the center of 9 points of privation and death. There are 9 satellites to our realm which you cannot deny is a glory. You've seen it yourself, Mother. Gosh, she called me Mother. Your kind left the planet of hands many thousands of years ago. It has sat empty, a gap in our perfection, reminding us not of what we are missing, but of the joyous return that our prodigal mothers and fathers will soon make. There are limits to our abilities. We cannot simply travel to where you have chosen to exile yourselves. We must use more subtle means. Oh, how we wish we could take you all in our arms. We have feast days for all of you at home, one for each of the 9. The Feast of the Planet of Hands has become the greatest event of our year. We cannot embrace you, lead our beloved forebears back to their home, but we love you. And we love you so much that with all our hearts and our souls, that we will show you how loved you truly are from across impossible distances beyond light. I make you this promise, all of you. I make this promise from the hearts of all of us at the center of the 9 points. You will come back of your own free will. We will not need to show you how, for the knowledge already rests within you. We will not need to explain why. You have seen the terrors that lurk outside of our protection. We will merely need to show you who we are, who you are, who all of us are. We will all be so much happier soon. Tomorrow shall be the greatest expression of our love we have ever conducted. That was it. This abomination of my flesh explaining the world to me below, the dead man on the cross echoing his words above. I awoke screaming 30 minutes ago. Tell 3 I'm sorry. the_man_at_the_threshold.avi 2051 from 0512. Read the end. Urgency high. I hope this gets through. If you're like me, seeing things on the BBC and the New York Times before getting briefed on them by staff is doing a number on you. It's over. The only thing left to tell you is what I know. 2 is dead. We only know that because she told us herself. Nice of her to leave a note, I guess. I've established contact with 3, 7, and 13. The rest, who knows? There aren't any protocols for something like this. The best we can tell is that they put on a performance. The Man at the Threshold. Act 1, 35 years. Act 1. Scene 1. 09:43 hours local time. Disturbance in the vicinity of Giza Plateau, Egypt. Egyptian military mobilized in response to apparent mass gathering in front of the Great Sphinx, based on initial intelligence of a Muslim Brotherhood action. Embedded media present. Massive information leak of anomalous phenomena. 09:47 hours local time. Spontaneous powerful sandstorm encircling an approximately 100-kilometer radius of the Great Sphinx. A battalion of the Egyptian army is present to witness the performance. 4 humanoids, appearing to be Semitic in appearance and clothed simply in white cloth and sandals, appear spontaneously at the scene as well. Several rounds discharged by soldiers present suggest that the humanoids are non-corporeal. The as-yet unidentified beings take no notice of any action occurring around them. Proteus. I hope that I'm not being improper when I say that I'm scared. Melita. We're all scared, Proteus. This is the day that our cohort has been preparing for our entire lives. Proteus. 3 of us will be chosen. Have we made enough of our time here? Will it comfort us if we are cast aside? Agus. Just look at the things we've done together. We've mapped an unknown star system, wrote a song that made us the heroes of the summer convocation, scaled the shadow pass of the mountain of ice. I tell you, Proteus, if they cast me out today, I can say that no matter what comes after, it was all worth it. Proteus. I hope to be as brave as you when I enter the chamber. Monashir. All accept what they are given in the threshold. Melita. How could it be otherwise? Agus. How could it be otherwise? 10:17 hours local time. Sandstorm intensifies briefly, obscuring all vision in the local area before immediately subsiding. When visibility is reestablished, no anomalous humanoids are present. However, the Great Sphinx has been removed, replaced with a blue light holographic projection. in the appearance of the Sphinx and of approximately the same size with no discernible source. Numerous photographic and videographic records are taken and circulated. Existential threat to consensus reality in progress. Act 1, Scene 2. 11:43 hours local time. Darkness falls midday in Tahrir Square in Cairo, Egypt. No evidence of a solar eclipse, cloud cover, or any other possible cause of such conditions is apparent. 9 moons appear to be visible in the night sky. Riots begin almost immediately, and messages proclaiming the end times begin to be broadcast over PA systems attached to several local mosques. Images corresponding to the 4 humanoids appearing at the Great Sphinx are projected via an unknown source onto the side of the Mugamma building, visible to all within the square. Activity stops as sound begins to accompany the images. The man. This set of 4, born on this day 35 years past. Are you ready to enter? Melita Agus Monashir. We are. Proteus. We are. The man. Do you see, as it has been intended, how even those cast into exile may have a taste of our beautiful world, until those that remain have shared the shadow of death with those that must take their leave now? Melita Agus Monashir. We do. Proteus. We do. The man. Look then out at this world. On this day, this is the threshold. This is the place where human society is made. It is here that the salvation of the few, so great in its perfection, so sacred in its magnificent beauty, is earned by the fate of the many. It is they who will make the ultimate sacrifice, and they who deserve our love and our honor most of all. Do you choose to pass the threshold of your own volition? Melita Agus Monashir. We do. The man. Melita Snowfall of the Shadow Peaks, step forward. Melita. I stand ready. The man. You shall dwell on the planet of eyes. Melita. I accept my duty. The man. Aegis Skysail, 3rd denizen of the Watch Cliffs, you shall be taken to the planet of skin. Aegis. I accept my duty. Aegis appears to stumble slightly, close to fainting. The man. Monashir Violet Light, the Lady of the Tower. I stand ready. You shall remain. Remember always the great love of your departed sisters and brothers, now and forever. Monashir. I shall. Monashir begins to weep. The man. Proteus Hammersmith, the Wayfinder. Proteus. I stand ready. Proteus trembles. The man. You are to come to the planet of hands. 12:32 hours local time. Upon concluding with the above dialogue, daylight returns to Tahrir Square. Of the estimated 10,000 people gathered in the square, several thousand spontaneously lose vision, and several hundred appear to be instantaneously flayed alive through unknown means. All other persons present in the square no longer have hands after the conclusion of the anomalous display, instead having completely healed stumps. Regional news networks, in particular Al Jazeera, begin to run coverage despite attempts at coordinated interference with dissemination of information. All nations have put their militaries on high alert, and a few look to have already taken the opportunity to settle a few scores in the confusion. That's the only thing that makes sense now, really. What do they think they're mobilizing against? A way to look like they're doing something, anyway. The churches, mosques, synagogues, etc. are overflowing. The Abrahamic folks are convinced that judgment is at hand. Everyone else just sort of figures that we're all doomed. The first reports of murder-suicides are coming in. Not as many as we might have expected, though. People have options. 001 made sure to let them know that.